In the glittering chaos of Thraxis 9, a city suspended like a diamond shard in the cold vacuum of space, it was easy to disappear. Easy, that is, if you wanted to. For Valara, it happened without trying. The orbital city hummed and groaned with life, a dizzying blend of alien languages, flashing holograms, and the ceaseless bustle of countless species. Vendors hawked steaming bowls of unidentified meats. Floating delivery drones zipped overhead like mechanical sparrows, dodging the occasional hurled curse or wrench. Somewhere a busker, a three-eyed Zinxian, plucked a tune on what looked like a harp made of laser strings. All of it should have felt alive, vibrant, thrilling. To Valara, it was just noise. She sat on the edge of the lower promenade, her feet dangling precariously over the abyss. Below her, thousands of floors stretched downward, a kaleidoscope of neon lights fading into an endless pit of shadow. No one noticed her there. They never did. Valara was Tsurnath, a race revered for their psychic gifts and their almost ethereal beauty. But where her kin shone brightly, their psychic auras radiant, Valara barely flickered. Her dull presence marked her as different, an unlit spark, as the others sneeringly called her. It didn't help that her frame, fragile even by Tsurnath standards, gave the impression that a stiff breeze might carry her away. She sighed, her translucent fingers brushing a strand of opalescent hair from her face. Below her, a janitorial bot whirred as it methodically swept discarded food wrappers into its belly. "At least you've got a purpose," she muttered. The bot ignored her, its programming immune to pity. Her stomach growled, a reminder that pity wouldn't buy her dinner. Valara pushed herself to her feet, brushing off her faded tunic, which had once been a vibrant shade of emerald, but now looked like it had lost an argument with a sun lamp. She had one last lead for a job, and if it failed, well, she wasn't eager to think about that. The employment office was a sleek affair, its polished floors and walls a sterile white broken only by pulsating blue lines of light that guided visitors to the kiosks. A holographic receptionist flickered to life as Valara approached. "Welcome to the Thraxis Career Nexus. Please state your species and skill set for optimized job matching." Valara hesitated, then cleared her throat. Tsurnath. No psychic abilities, but I'm good with tools." The hologram blinked twice, as though processing this shocking revelation. "Error. Tsurnath without psychic abilities is not recognized in the database. Suggestion. Seek basic training in compatible fields, such as retail or custodial services." Valara's cheeks flushed a soft pink. "I don't need training. I've already worked with—" She trailed off, realizing the futility of arguing with a projection. Behind her, a group of towering Drevians snickered. One of them, his skin a deep shade of cobalt, leaned down. "Hey, unlit spark, maybe they'll let you sweep the floors if you ask nicely." The group erupted into laughter, and Valara's stomach twisted. She turned on her heel and fled, their jeers echoing in her ears. Hours later, Valara found herself in the city's scrap district, a maze of towering heaps of discarded tech. This was her refuge, a place where no one cared who you were so long as you didn't break anything valuable. She liked to imagine that among the rusted circuits and shattered screens, there was something waiting for her, something useful, something extraordinary. She climbed a particularly unstable pile, her balance aided by years of navigating these metallic mountains. At the summit, she found it, a sleek black device, almost unscathed. Its surface was smooth, broken only by a single red button. Curiosity won out over caution. Valara pressed the button. The device whirred to life, projecting a grainy hologram of a human male with a wild mane of curly hair and an unsettlingly intense gaze. "You've got the eye of the tiger," the hologram declared. A pulse of music followed, rhythmic and triumphant. Valara tilted her head. "What's a tiger?" she wondered aloud. The music continued, and to her surprise, her feet started tapping. Then her arms moved, flailing more than dancing. By the time the chorus hit, she was spinning, laughing, and losing herself in the absurdity of it all. It was in this moment of uncharacteristic joy that Valara felt it, a faint tingle, like a whisper at the edge of her mind. She stopped mid-spin, her laughter dying as she scanned the shadows below. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. Silence. She told herself it was nothing, probably just a malfunctioning bot, and yet, the feeling lingered. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. Far above, a figure watched from a concealed vantage point. The human adjusted the visor over his scarred face, the faint glow of its heads-up display reflecting in his eyes. "Well, aren't you an interesting little anomaly?" he murmured, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He had come to Thraxis 9 for a mission, but perhaps he had found something, or someone, worth diverting his plans for. The bustling depths of Thraxis 9 weren't exactly designed for subtlety, but for someone like Rylan Jax, subtlety was less a skill and more of an afterthought. The human mercenary prowled through the city's labyrinthine lower levels, his scarred face hidden beneath the flickering shadows of neon lights. His cybernetic arm hummed faintly, the occasional spark dancing from its joint. The mission was simple: retrieve the stolen biotech and get out quietly. But quiet had a habit of turning into chaos around Rylan. The stolen package was currently in the possession of a local gang, the Crimson Syndicate, a group whose idea of diplomacy involved plasma rifles and questionable haircuts. Rylan wasn't worried. He dealt with worse. His primary concern wasn't the gang, but navigating Thraxis 9 without stepping on one of the countless toes scurrying about the underbelly. Unfortunately, it was this precise moment that fate decided to drop Valara into his path. Valara had spent the better part of an hour nervously clutching the strange music device she'd found. The grainy hologram of the human had long since flickered out, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the faint echo of its triumphant tune. Something about it had stirred her, though she wasn't sure why. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, had been watching her earlier. It wasn't a pleasant sensation. Her plan was to return to the scrap heaps, her unofficial sanctuary, but her stomach had other ideas. She passed by a street vendor, the sizzling aroma of roasted corn worms wafting through the air. Her stomach growled loudly enough to earn a few glances from passers-by. Embarrassed, Valara quickened her pace, only to find herself face to chest plate with a hulking Drevlock enforcer. The Drevlock glared down at her, his reptilian features contorted in annoyance. "Watch it, runt." Sorry," Valara stammered, stepping aside. "Clumsy, sparkless freak," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. Her cheeks flushed as she hurried away, biting back tears. She barely noticed the man with the sparking cybernetic arm weaving through the crowd until she was practically on top of him. Rylan felt the collision before he saw it, a small figure stumbling into his side. He glanced down to see a wide-eyed alien girl staring up at him, clutching a peculiar black device. "Whoa there, noodle arms," Rylan said, steadying her with his good hand. "Where's the fire?" Valara blinked at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I wasn't—" "Relax, kid. Not gonna bite." He studied her for a moment, noting the way she clung to the device like it was the last shred of dignity in the galaxy. "What's that?" "It's mine," she said quickly, holding it tighter. Rylan raised an eyebrow. "All right, relax. Just asking. Didn't think it was a weapon or anything." He paused. "Unless it is, in which case points for creativity." "It's not," Valara said, a little too loudly. "Good to know." Rylan smirked and started to move past her, only to stop short when a high-pitched alarm pierced the air. He turned just in time to see a surveillance drone hovering above them, its red eye flashing ominously. "Oh, fantastic," Rylan muttered. The drone's alarm grew louder, drawing the attention of nearby guards and onlookers. Valara shrank under the scrutiny, her panic evident. "Why is it looking at me?" she whispered. "It's not looking at you," Ryland said, glancing around. "It's looking at us." "What did I do?" "Probably tripped its sensors by hanging around me." "Congratulations, kid. You're now an accomplice to whatever they think I'm doing." Vylara paled. "What do we do?" Ryland sighed. "First rule of trouble, don't panic. And second rule, run." With that, he grabbed her arm and pulled her into a sprint. The chase that ensued was a blur of chaos and neon. Ryland led the way, weaving through narrow alleys and leaping over debris with practiced ease. Vylara struggled to keep up, her legs burning as she tripped over her own feet more than once. Behind them, the drone emitted a sharp zap, narrowly missing Ryland's head. "Hey, watch the hair!" he shouted over his shoulder, his voice dripping with mock indignation. "Hair?" Vylara panted. "You barely have any," Ryland barked a laugh. "She's got jokes. Maybe you'll survive this after all." They rounded a corner and ducked into a dilapidated vending booth. Ryland pressed a series of buttons on the machine, and to Vylara's surprise, it began dispensing cans of fizz drink at an alarming rate. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Improvising." He stacked the cans in front of the booth's entrance. "Is this really going to—" Before she could finish, the drone rounded the corner, its targeting lasers scanning for them. The cans, apparently shaken from their rapid dispensing, exploded in a fizzy shower of liquid and carbonation. The drone spun wildly, its circuits sparking. Ryland grinned. "See? Improvising." Vylara stared at him, equal parts amazed and exasperated. "You're insane." "Thank you, now come on." When they finally stopped running, Vylara collapsed against a wall, gasping for air. "So," Ryland said, leaning casually against a crate, "what's your deal, Noodle Arms? You got some kind of death wish, or are you just unlucky?" I don't have a deal," she said, still catching her breath. "Sure you do. Everyone does, even if it's a bad one." Vylara hesitated, then looked up at him. "Why are you helping me?" "Helping you?" Ryland laughed. "You tripped a drone and got me into a chase. If anything, you're helping me build character." She frowned, unsure whether to feel insulted or grateful. "Well," he said, his tone softening, "you looked like you needed it." For the first time in a long time, Vylara felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Hope. "Thanks," she muttered. "Don't thank me yet," Ryland said, scanning the alley. "We're not out of this mess, not by a long shot." The alleys of Thraxis 9 were never truly quiet. Even in its darkest, narrowest corridors, where the neon glow from the upper levels barely reached, the city's pulse remained constant. Distant engines rumbling, alien chatter filtering through vents, and the occasional zap of an overloaded circuit. Vylara and Ryland crouched behind a stack of crates, their breaths still uneven from the chase. The faint hum of surveillance drones patrolling above made Vylara flinch each time they passed. "So," Ryland said, leaning back against the crate with an infuriatingly casual smirk, "care to explain how I ended up babysitting the galaxy's clumsiest Zernath?" "I didn't ask for your help," Vylara shot back, clutching her music device tightly. "Didn't seem like you were handling things too well on your own, Noodle Arms." Vylara's cheeks flushed. "Stop calling me that." "What, Noodle Arms?" "Fine. What do you prefer, Sparkless Wonder? Tech Goblin?" "Tech Goblin?" she repeated, glaring at him. Ryland shrugged. "Hey, it's catchy." Before she could argue, a low beep came from his cybernetic arm. He lifted it, the holographic display glowing faintly as a map appeared. "All right, kid. Fun as this banter is, I've got places to be, so let's figure out how to part ways without getting each other vaporized." Vylara hesitated, glancing at the map. "Where are you going?" Ryland raised an eyebrow. "You've got some nerve asking that, considering you just ruined my stealth op." "You said it yourself. You're stuck with me now, so maybe I can help." "Help?" Ryland snorted. "Kid, you couldn't even help yourself back there. What are you gonna do? Trip another drone?" Vilara bristled. I'm good with tech. I can rewire just about anything, and I'm smarter than I look. That's a low bar. She glared at him, and for a moment, Rylan almost looked impressed. Their uneasy truce was cemented an hour later when they stumbled upon a locked cargo bay. Rylan needed a way in, and Vilara, eager to prove herself, offered her skills. The lock was a sleek piece of alien engineering, its surface glowing with shifting glyphs. Think you can handle it, tech goblin? Rylan asked, leaning against the wall with an infuriating grin. Vilara ignored him, focusing on the lock. Her delicate fingers danced over the glyphs, her mind piecing together their patterns. Within moments, the lock clicked open. Not bad, Rylan admitted, stepping past her into the cargo bay. You've got potential, Noodle Arms. Vilara sighed. I thought we agreed. Her protest was cut short as she followed him inside. The cargo bay was vast, its walls lined with crates stamped with the Crimson Syndicate's emblem, a jagged, blood-red claw. Bingo, Rylan muttered, his eyes scanning the room. Now where's the package? As he began rummaging through the crates, Vilara wandered further in, her curiosity piqued by the strange devices scattered about. She picked up a small, orb-like gadget that hummed faintly in her hands. What's this? She asked. Rylan glanced over, his expression turning serious. Put that down. Carefully. Why? Because it's probably a grenade. Vilara's eyes widened as she quickly set the orb back on the shelf. Why is there a grenade just sitting here? Why are you picking up random stuff in a gangster's warehouse? She opened her mouth to retort, but the sound of footsteps outside made them both freeze. The next few minutes were a blur of chaos. A group of Crimson Syndicate thugs burst into the cargo bay, their weapons drawn. Well, well, their leader drawled, a hulking alien with metallic scales. Looks like we've got ourselves a couple of trespassers. Rylan sighed, raising his hands. Look, we're just passing through. No need for— Quiet, human, the leader snarled. You're messing with the Syndicate. That's a death sentence. Vilara, frozen in fear, glanced at Rylan, who gave her a subtle nod. All right, fine, Rylan said, his tone suddenly lighter. But before you vaporize us, can I ask one thing? The leader frowned. What? Have you considered getting a new logo? The claw thing's a little cliché. The thugs exchanged confused looks, giving Rylan the opening he needed. With a swift motion, he activated his cybernetic arm, a shockwave knocking the nearest thugs off their feet. Run! He shouted, grabbing Vilara's hand and pulling her toward the exit. They barely made it out of the cargo bay before the thugs recovered. Laser fire followed them as they ducked and weaved through the labyrinthine alleys. Is this your idea of stealth? Vilara shouted. Hey, you're the one who wanted to help. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a dead end. Rylan cursed under his breath, scanning their surroundings for options. Vilara's eyes landed on a pile of scrap nearby. Give me a minute. We don't have a minute. Just trust me. Grumbling, Rylan turned to face the approaching thugs, his cybernetic arm sparking as he prepared to fight. Meanwhile, Vilara worked furiously, her hands flying over the scraps as she pieced together a makeshift device. When the thugs rounded the corner, Vilara held up her creation, a small, clunky gadget that emitted a high-pitched whine. What's that supposed to do? Rylan asked. The device suddenly exploded in a blinding flash of light, disorienting the thugs and filling the alley with smoke. That, Vilara said, coughing as she grabbed Rylan's arm. Now come on. When they finally reached a safe distance, Rylan turned to her, his expression a mix of annoyance and admiration. You're full of surprises, tech goblin, he said. I told you I'm good with tech, Vilara replied, though her trembling hands betrayed her nerves. Rylan chuckled, clapping her on the shoulder. All right, kid, you've earned a spot for now. For now? Don't get cocky. You're still a noodle arm. Despite herself, Vilara smiled. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged, if only a little. Valara sat cross-legged on the uneven floor of an abandoned workshop, her arms hugging her knees, as Rylan rummaged through a pile of scrap nearby. The air was thick with the smell of burnt circuits and lubricant, and the flickering light above them buzzed in protest with every surge of power. "This place smells like a Drevlock's armpit," Rylan muttered, tossing a piece of broken machinery over his shoulder. Valara wrinkled her nose. "You say that like you've actually been close enough to a Drevlock to know. Let's just say I've been in some less than glamorous situations," Rylan replied, smirking. "One time I had to crawl through a sewer duct on Rhytheon 7, lost a good pair of boots that day." "Is every mission you take just one disaster after another?" "Not every mission." He paused, pretending to think. "There was that one time on Meraxis Prime." "Wait, no. That involved a sentient ooze monster." "Never mind." Valara stifled a laugh, though she quickly straightened when Rylan turned to face her. "All right, Tech Goblin," he said, crossing his arms. "If you're sticking around, we need to address the obvious." "And what's that?" "You can't fight." Valara frowned, her cheeks flushing. "I don't need to fight. I'm good with tech, that's my thing." "That's fine when you're in a workshop or hacking a lock," Rylan said. "But out there?" He gestured toward the world beyond the workshop walls. "Out there, you're going to need more than quick fingers and clever gadgets. What about you? You're supposed to be the muscle." Rylan raised an eyebrow. "I'm not always going to be around to save your noodle-armed self. Sooner or later, you're going to have to pull your weight." Training began the next day, and to say it was rough would be an understatement. Rylan had scavenged a few training weapons, blunt sticks and a weighted baton, and insisted on starting with the basics. "The first rule of a fight," he said, tossing her the baton, "is don't get hit." "That seems obvious." "You'd be surprised how many people forget it," Rylan replied. "All right, come at me." "What?" "Attack me. Let's see what you've got." Valara hesitated, clutching the baton awkwardly. She took a tentative swing, which Rylan easily sidestepped. "Is that the best you can do?" he teased. "I'm not a fighter." "No kidding." Her frustration bubbled over, and she swung again, this time with more force. Rylan caught her arm mid-swing and twisted it just enough to make her drop the baton. "Rule number 2, he said, smirking as he handed the baton back to her. "Don't telegraph your moves." Valara glared at him. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "A little." By the end of the session, Valara was bruised, exhausted, and thoroughly humiliated. "Why do I have to learn this?" she grumbled, slumping against a wall. "Because I've seen too many people get killed because they couldn't defend themselves," Rylan said, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "And I'm not letting that happen to you." Valara blinked, caught off guard by his sincerity. For a moment, she saw a flicker of something deeper behind his cocky exterior. Pain, regret, maybe even guilt. "Fine," she muttered, "but you're a terrible teacher." Rylan laughed. "And you're a terrible student. Guess we're even." Later that evening, as Valara nursed her sore muscles, she found herself tinkering with one of the gadgets she'd scavenged from the cargo bay. It was a small disc-shaped device with an unfamiliar interface, but its potential intrigued her. "What's that?" Rylan asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Not sure yet," she admitted. "But I think I can reprogram it to emit an EMP pulse. Might be useful." "Now you're thinking like a mercenary," Rylan said, grinning. Valara rolled her eyes. "I'm thinking like someone who doesn't want to get shot." "Same difference." The next day, their training continued, and while Valara's combat skills were still lacking, her determination began to show. She learned to dodge, block, and even land a few hits, much to Rylan's surprise. "Not bad, Noodle Arms," he said after she managed to knock the baton out of his hand. "Don't call me that," she said, panting. "What should I call you then?" "Valara." "Too formal. How about Scrap Rat?" She groaned. "You're impossible." "Thanks. I try." Their routine of training, Scavenging and dodging trouble became oddly comfortable, and Vylara found herself growing more confident, not just in her abilities but in her place alongside Rylan. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just a weak, sparkless outcast. She was learning, growing, and, dare she admit it, having fun. Of course, their newfound camaraderie didn't go unnoticed. The Crimson Syndicate had put out a bounty on the human and his alien accomplice, and the walls of Thraxis 9 were closing in. "We can't stay here much longer," Rylan said one night as they studied the map on his arm. "The Syndicate's got eyes everywhere." "So where do we go?" Vylara asked. "Off-world," he replied. "But first, we need a ship, and I think I know where to find one." "Let me guess," Vylara said dryly. "It's going to involve sneaking into a heavily guarded hangar and getting shot at." Rylan grinned. "You catch on quick." As they prepared for their next move, Vylara couldn't shake the feeling that her life had taken a turn she never could have imagined. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was fighting. And for the first time, she felt like she was becoming someone worth fighting for. The hangar loomed ahead like a fortress of metal and light, its exterior bristling with security drones and automated turrets. Vylara stared at it from their vantage point on a nearby rooftop, her stomach churning with nerves. "You're sure about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rylan grinned, adjusting the straps on his utility belt. "Sure? Number confident?" "Absolutely." "That's not reassuring." "It wasn't meant to be," he replied. "Now remember the plan. Create a distraction, disable the defenses, and get to the ship." Vylara interrupted, her tone dry. "Yeah, I've got it, but I still don't see why I'm the distraction." "Because you're small and sneaky," Rylan said, patting her shoulder. "And expendable?" "Not at all. You're just better at looking harmless." Vylara shot him a withering glare. "I'm rethinking this whole alliance thing." "Too late for that, scrap rat," Rylan said with a wink. "Now go make some noise." Vylara crept down to the hangar's perimeter, her heart pounding with each step. The security drones buzzed overhead, their glowing optics scanning for intruders. She clutched the small EMP device she'd modified, her fingers trembling slightly. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "You've got this. Just don't die." She activated the EMP and tossed it toward a cluster of drones. The device landed with a faint clink, and a moment later, a pulse of energy rippled outward. The drones flickered and dropped from the sky like metallic raindrops. "Nice," she muttered, allowing herself a small smile. Her satisfaction was short-lived, however, as the turrets swiveled toward her position, their targeting systems humming ominously. "Oh, come on!" she yelped, diving behind a crate as a barrage of laser fire erupted around her. Meanwhile, Rylan moved swiftly through the shadows, using the chaos to his advantage. He approached the hangar's control hub, a sleek tower bristling with antennas and holographic displays. "All right, big guy," he muttered to himself. "Let's see what you're hiding." He plugged a device into the control panel, his cybernetic arm interfacing with the system. The holograms flickered as he navigated the security protocols, his fingers flying over the virtual keys. "Piece of cake," he said, grinning as he disabled the turrets. Back at the perimeter, Vylara peeked out from behind her cover to see the turrets powering down. She exhaled a shaky breath of relief. "About time," she muttered, scrambling to her feet. Her comm crackled to life, Rylan's voice filtering through. "You're welcome, by the way." "Don't get cocky," she replied. "What's next?" "Meet me at the main hangar door, and try not to trip any alarms on the way." "No promises." Inside the hangar, the ship they were after sat gleaming under the harsh lights. It was a sleek vessel, its design unmistakably military-grade, with twin engines and a cockpit that seemed to glow faintly with internal power. "That's our ride," Rylan said, his eyes lighting up. "It's bigger than I expected," Vylara admitted, her voice tinged with awe. "Don't let it intimidate you. Just think of it as a really expensive tin can. A tin can with guns, she pointed out. Exactly. Now let's get aboard before the syndicate realizes we're here. As they approached the ship, the sound of boots on metal rang out behind them. Vylara turned to see a squad of Crimson Syndicate enforcers entering the hangar, their weapons drawn. "Stop them!" the squad leader barked, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. "Why is it always a squad?" Rylan grumbled, drawing his blaster. "Would you prefer a single guard?" Vylara asked, ducking behind a crate. "Yes, I could handle one guard in my sleep." The ensuing firefight was chaotic, with lasers flying in every direction. Vylara fumbled with her makeshift gadgets, managing to deploy a smokescreen that temporarily disoriented their attackers. "Nice work, Scrap Rat," Rylan called out, firing a well-placed shot that took down the squad leader. "Stop calling me that," she shouted back, her voice muffled by the smoke. Thought they finally reached the ship's ramp, and Rylan ushered Vylara inside as he covered their retreat. The interior was cramped but functional, with a cockpit full of blinking lights and a faint hum of power running through the walls. "Get us airborne," Rylan yelled as he sealed the ramp behind them. "Me?" Vylara exclaimed. "Yes, you. You're the tech genius, remember?" She scrambled to the cockpit, her hands shaking as she scanned the unfamiliar controls. Okay, she muttered, trying to steady her breathing. "How hard can it be?" The ship's console beeped at her, its interface displaying a series of glyphs she didn't recognize. "Of course it's in an alien language," she groaned. Rylan appeared behind her, his expression calm despite the chaos. "Look for the throttle. It should be that lever there." Vylara grabbed the lever and pulled it, and the ship lurched to life. The engines roared, and the vessel began to rise, its landing gear retracting with a satisfying hiss. "We're flying," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Not yet," Rylan replied, sliding into the co-pilot seat. "Now comes the hard part." As the ship ascended, the hangar's defense systems activated, and laser turrets sprang to life. "Why didn't you disable all of them?" Vylara demanded, gripping the controls tightly. "I was in a hurry," Rylan shot back. The ship swerved wildly as Vylara struggled to avoid the incoming fire. Rylan took over the weapons system, firing back at the turrets with precision. "Hold her steady," he yelled. "I'm trying." With a final burst of speed, the ship shot out of the hangar and into the open sky. The turrets fell silent as they left the Syndicate's territory behind, and Vylara slumped back in her seat, her heart pounding. "We made it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Rylan grinned, clapping her on the shoulder. "Not bad for your first time flying." "Let's never do that again," she muttered. "Agreed, but first we need to figure out where we're going." As the stars stretched out before them, Vylara felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. She didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself, and she was determined to see it through. The hum of the ship's engines filled the cockpit, a steady rhythm that felt oddly comforting after the chaos they had just escaped. Vylara stared out at the stars, her reflection in the glass faintly illuminated by the controls. For the first time in her life, the vastness of space didn't feel oppressive. Rylan leaned back in the co-pilot's seat, his boots casually propped up on the console. "So where to next, Captain?" "Captain?" Vylara repeated, turning to him with a skeptical look. "Well, you did get us off the planet," he said with a smirk. "Technically, that makes you the one in charge. Does that mean I get to tell you to shut up?" "You can try." Their banter was interrupted by a loud clunk from somewhere deep within the ship. Vylara froze, her gaze darting to Rylan. "Was that supposed to happen?" she asked. "Depends," he said, swinging his feet off the console and standing up. "Did it sound like a minor system adjustment or a catastrophic failure?" "Closer to the second one." "Great. Let's go take a look." and the noise had come from the engine bay, a cramped and dimly lit space that smelled faintly of ozone and burnt metal. Valara crouched beside the main power core, her hands deftly examining the cables and conduits. "It's not the core," she muttered, more to herself than to Rylan. "The diagnostics are stable, but something's draining power from the secondary systems." "Could it be sabotage?" Rylan asked, leaning against the wall. "Unless the Syndicate planted something while we were in the hangar, I doubt it." "Then what?" Before Valara could answer, a faint chirping sound echoed through the engine bay. She froze, her ears twitching as she tried to pinpoint the source. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Rylan asked, his hand instinctively reaching for his blaster. The chirping grew louder, accompanied by a rustling sound. Valara slowly turned her head, her eyes widening as she spotted a small, metallic creature scuttling along a support beam. "What in the stars is that?" Rylan said, his voice equal parts fascination and alarm. The creature looked like a cross between a crab and a spider, its segmented body glinting under the dim light. Its eyes glowed faintly, and tiny sparks of electricity crackled along its legs as it moved. "It's a Techmite," Valara whispered. "A what?" "A Techmite. They're scavenger drones, usually found in derelict ships. They feed on energy sources and replicate themselves using scrap." "Well, that explains the power drain," Rylan said, drawing his blaster. "Wait," Valara grabbed his arm. "Don't shoot it." "Why not?" "It's eating our ship." "If you destroy it, it could trigger a failsafe that activates the rest of the swarm." Rylan frowned. "The rest of the swarm?" As if on cue, more chirping filled the air, and Valara looked up to see dozens of Techmites emerging from the shadows. They scuttled across the walls and ceiling, their movements synchronized like a hive mind. "This just keeps getting better," Rylan muttered. Over the next few hours, Valara and Rylan worked frantically to contain the infestation. Valara crafted a makeshift energy lure, a device that emitted a low-frequency pulse designed to attract the Techmites. "If we can lead them into the airlock," she explained, "we can eject them into space without damaging the ship." "Sounds good," Rylan said. "But what if it doesn't work?" "Then we hope they like the taste of blaster fire." Deploying the lure was easier said than done. The Techmites swarmed toward it as soon as Valara activated the device, their glowing eyes fixated on the energy pulse. "Keep moving!" Rylan shouted, firing a few warning shots to keep the creatures at bay. "I'm trying!" Valara yelled back, clutching the lure as she sprinted toward the airlock. The Techmites followed in a relentless wave, their metallic legs clinking against the floor. Valara reached the airlock and quickly set the lure inside, slamming the control panel to seal the door. "Got it!" she called out. Rylan hit the eject button, and the airlock hissed as it vented the Techmites into the void. The creatures disappeared into the blackness, their chirping fading into silence. "Well," Rylan said, leaning against the wall and catching his breath, "that was fun." "Your definition of fun needs work," Valara replied, wiping sweat from her brow. With the Techmites dealt with, they returned to the cockpit to assess the damage. The power systems were still operational, but several non-essential systems had been compromised. "We've lost long-range communications," Valara said, frowning at the console, "and the nav system is glitching." "Can you fix it?" Rylan asked. "Eventually, but for now we're flying blind." Rylan sighed. "Blind and on the run. Just another day in paradise." Despite the setbacks, the mood in the cockpit was lighter than expected. They had survived another challenge, and Valara couldn't help but feel a growing sense of camaraderie with Rylan. "You know," she said, leaning back in her seat, "this whole being a fugitive thing isn't as bad as I thought." "Really?" Rylan said, raising an eyebrow. "Because I was just about to retire and start a nice quiet life on some backwater moon. Somehow I don't see you as the quiet type." "Fair point," he admitted. They shared a laugh, the tension of the day melting away as the stars stretched endlessly before them. As they drifted through space, Rylan glanced at Valara, a rare look of seriousness crossing his face. "You did good back there," he said. She blinked, surprised by the compliment. "Thanks, but I couldn't have done it without you." "Don't sell yourself short," he replied. "You're stronger than you think." Valara smiled, her chest swelling with a mix of pride and gratitude. For the first time, she felt like she was truly part of something bigger than herself, a team, a partnership, maybe even a family. And as they charted their course into the unknown, she knew one thing for certain: she was ready for whatever came next. The ship drifted into orbit around a pale, blue-tinged moon, its surface streaked with crystalline rivers and sprawling bioluminescent forests. Valara gazed at the scene through the viewport, her breath catching at the beauty of it. "That's Erythra 3, Rylan said, leaning back in his seat. "Neutral territory, a haven for rogues, smugglers, and anyone trying to stay off the Syndicate's radar." "Sounds charming," Valara replied, her voice laced with skepticism. "It's not so bad," he said. "The locals are friendly, as long as you don't owe them money or insult their cooking." "Good to know." As they prepared to land, Rylan glanced at Valara. "You sure you're ready for this?" She hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of the control panel. "I think so, but what if I'm not?" "Then we fake it," Rylan said with a grin. "That's half the battle." The landing zone was a bustling hub of activity, with ships of all shapes and sizes parked haphazardly across the rocky expanse. Vendors lined the perimeter, their stalls overflowing with exotic goods and unidentifiable snacks. Valara followed Rylan as they navigated the crowd, her senses overwhelmed by the cacophony of voices and the riot of colors. "Stay close," Rylan said over his shoulder. "And don't make eye contact with anyone selling miracle cures." "Why?" she asked. "Because last time I did, I ended up with a pet slime that wouldn't stop singing." "Sounds delightful." "Trust me, it wasn't." Their first stop was a dimly lit cantina, tucked into the side of a cliff. The air was thick with the scent of spiced drinks and the hum of alien chatter. Rylan led Valara to a secluded table in the back, where a wiry man with a mechanical arm waited. "Rylan," the man said, his tone equal parts amusement and exasperation. "I should have known you'd show up here eventually." "Miss me, Kellen?" Rylan replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "Like a bad rash." Valara stifled a laugh as she sat beside Rylan. "This is Valara," Rylan said, gesturing to her. "She's my partner." "Partner?" Kellen repeated, raising an eyebrow. "In crime," Valara added quickly, earning a smirk from Rylan. Now, the meeting with Kellen was tense, but productive. He provided them with forged identities and the coordinates to a hidden outpost where they could lay low. In exchange, Rylan handed over a small gleaming cube that pulsed faintly with light. "What's that?" Valara asked as they left the cantina. "Let's just say it's worth more than this entire moon," Rylan replied. "Then why give it to him?" "Because staying alive is priceless." Back aboard the ship, Valara sat in the cockpit, staring out at the stars. The journey had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. She no longer felt like the frail, overlooked girl she'd been back on her homeworld. "I see that look," Rylan said, leaning against the doorway. "What look?" "The I'm overthinking everything look." "I'm just processing," she admitted. "Everything we've been through, everything I've learned, it's a lot." "Yeah, but look at you now," he said, sitting beside her. "You've gone from a scrap rat to a bona fide fighter." Valara smiled faintly. "Thanks to you." "Give yourself some credit," Rylan said. "I just showed you the door. You're the one who walked through it." Their respite was short-lived. A proximity alarm blared, jolting them both to their feet. What now? Rylan muttered, rushing to the controls. Valara scanned the readouts, her eyes narrowing. It's a syndicate cruiser. They must have tracked us here. Of course they did, Rylan said, his tone laced with irritation. We can't catch a break. The cruiser loomed on the horizon, its weapons charging. We can't fight them, Valara said. No, but we can outsmart them, Rylan replied, a mischievous glint in his eye. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Valara rerouted power to the engines, while Rylan plotted an escape route. As the cruiser fired its first salvo, the ship lurched forward, narrowly avoiding the blast. Hang on! Rylan shouted, as he maneuvered the ship through the moon's narrow canyons. The cruiser gave chase, its weapons lighting up the sky. Valara worked frantically at the console, deploying decoys and scrambling their signature. Almost there, Rylan said, his voice tense. As they neared the outpost, Valara activated a cloaking device, a last-minute addition she'd cobbled together during their repairs. The ship shimmered and disappeared from view, leaving the cruiser behind. They're veering off, Valara said, exhaling in relief. Nice work, partner, Rylan said, grinning. The outpost was a quiet, hidden sanctuary nestled within a cavern. As they stepped off the ship, Valara felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. What now? She asked. Now we lay low, Rylan said. Regroup, plan our next move, and maybe get some rest for once. Valara nodded, her gaze drifting to the stars. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to face it, stronger, braver, and no longer afraid of the unknown. For the first time she felt like she truly belonged, and that, she realized, was worth everything.